Hello, and welcome to my podcast, Good Grief. My name is Dr. Christine Malone, and in this podcast, we talk about trauma, tragedy, and survival. In each episode, I will interview someone that has gone through grief in some way, and we will discuss the impact it has had on their life. By sharing these stories, we hope that others won't feel alone should they be going through similar situations. Enjoy. Okay, listeners, thank you so much for joining me for this episode. My guest today is going to tell us some story about her adversity she's been through in her life, and then how she's taken that to really not only help herself, but help others. So, guest, if you would introduce yourself and just kind of give us some background on some of the challenges you've been through, and then we could kind of move into, how you've moved on from that.
Great. Thanks very much, Christine. It's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me. So I am Lois Wagner, and I am in Johannesburg, South Africa. I always say, smile with Lois, your friend for forgiveness. And I say that because everyone says to me, you keep smiling despite all your adversities and challenges in life. You're always smiling. But I've taken this smile and I've turned it into an acronym to describe what it is that I do. So the S is I'm a speaker and storyteller. I've got a published book and a TEDx talk. I'm a mentor, inspirer, a learning facilitator, and an empowering coach. So that's my smile. And my challenges that I've had through my life started off with quite a dysfunctional childhood. But we got through that, and I became a businesswoman, then became an entrepreneur. And then, unfortunately, during one of my entrepreneurial stints, when I had a digital printing company, back in the day when digital printing was still a very new and novel thing, I was working late one night and I was brutally attacked and raped and tied up and left to bleed to death. And after that, I didn't want to work there anymore. I was in partnership. I was in a 50-50 partnership. And instead, I didn't want to work there. And I asked my partner to buy me out. And instead of buying me out, he betrayed me and he put the business into liquidation. Oh. And so not only was I coping with the trauma of the attack, I was now also having to start my life over again. Yeah. So that was quite traumatic. And then I've had other lesser dramatic experiences, but those were the two big things that happened one after the other that really changed the course of my life.
I can totally understand that. So I'd love to move to you talking about forgiveness. So I know in your information that you sent before the show that you said you forgave your rapist and the business partner who betrayed you. And I kind of want to get into, how did you do that? What was there a mechanism you followed? Was it something you just said in your head, or you just, I mean, how did you get there? Because I'm thinking those two events in and of themselves, I personally would be very difficult for me to forgive either of those people for those acts. So I'm just curious if you could tell us a bit about how to get to that forgiveness.
Well, the business partner came first. I hated him. I hated him with such a passion. I always said, if I see him in the road and I'm driving my car, I'm going to ride him over. I really, really hated him. And one day I just thought, what are you hating him for? It's not doing him any good. It's not doing him any bad. It's not doing me. It's making me angry and bitter and twisted. And I just thought, this is no good. I need to forgive him. So I just picked up the phone and I said, I wanted to see him. He didn't want to see me. I persuaded him to meet me. And I just asked him why he did what he did. I let him know the consequences of what he did, how it impacted on my life, because after the business went into liquidation, he then got his wife to buy the business back. And so I went deep into debt and he walked away scot-free. Oh, so I was carrying all the debt, and I carried that debt for years. And I just wanted him to know that what he had done, where it had left me in my life. And so, yes, I just sat there and I just said, I forgive you. and I walked away, and that's it. Never thought about him much. Doesn't cross my mind much. I let go. I literally let go. So that was the first forgiveness. And I didn't think much about it. It's just something I did at the time. I just felt I have to forgive him. And then 13 years later, I left the country. I went to live in the Middle East, and I was coming home for my first holiday. So it was 14 years after the attack. And I just thought, in those 14 years, I'd never really thought about the rapist. I'd never thought about, was he still in prison? Was he dead? Was he alive? Just, I pushed it back deep into the recesses of my mind, which had a negative consequence, which we can talk about later. But I just thought, I wonder if he's still in prison. He was given a 25-year prison sentence, which in those days, and this is going back 25 years, 26 years now, in those days, it was unheard of to get such a steep sentence. So I had a great public prosecutor. And I was coming home for this holiday, and I thought, gosh, I wonder if he's still in prison. So I contacted the authorities, and they said, yes, he was in prison. And he was coming up for parole the day after I arrived in the country. And the coincidence is that the law had just changed in South Africa, allowing victims, they call us victims, of serious crime to attend a parole hearing. So I was the first person in the country to actually attend one of these new parole hearings. And all my friends back in the Middle East were saying, oh, you can't go, you'll get triggered. It's going, what are you going for? And I said, the universe has spoken. I've got to go. There was no real thought about it. It was just something I had to do. And I asked my sister if she could come with me, but she was otherwise engaged. And I asked the detective who was the first on the scene if she could come with me, and she was otherwise engaged. And then I thought, well, I started this journey alone. I need to finish it alone. And then one of my friends said to me, Lois, if you're going to see him, you've got to forgive him. And I said, don't be ridiculous. How can I forgive this man who had this terrible impact on my life? But I thought about it, and I Googled and I Googled and I Googled, and I prepared this long, laborious speech just in case. And I got to the prison, and they weren't quite sure how to deal with me. So they explained the procedure to me. Then they called him in, and they went through all the legalities and the proceedings. And then they said, did I have anything to say? And I said, yes. And I pulled out my prepared speech, and I started reading it, and I thought, this is far too complex and highfalutin. First of all, he only had a grade 6 education, and his English was not his first language. So I thought, if I'm battling to understand it, he's not going to understand it. So I just looked at him and I said something to the effect of, I want to completely and compassionately forgive you, and I take the responsibility from my higher self, and I hand it back to you, to your higher self, to take responsibility, and I forgive you. Everybody in the room was stunned, including me. And the authorities said to me that they would let me know in 7 days if he got parole or not. And it was the most amazing feeling. I just looked at them and I said, no, you won't tell me in 7 days if he gets parole or not, because I don't need to know anymore. He has now got nothing to do with me. And whether he's in prison, if he lives or dies, it's not my problem anymore. I had broken that bond that had been holding me to him all of those years. I broke that bond, and it truly, truly set me free. I didn't walk out of that prison. I flew out of that prison. And to this day, I've never yet been able to describe that feeling other than the total sense of freedom and peace, and just that letting go, how powerful it was. And then when I realized the power of forgiveness, then I started working on how I can help other people learn how to forgive, not going through the complicated process. I went through a much simpler process.
Wow. Yeah, your story is is hitting me in a very personal space. I'm curious now, in both of your examples, you face this person in person. So do you think that had anything to do with the power of how the forgiveness landed on you because you were there in person and that, eye to eye, they could, like hear you and see you and so on? Or is it something that, if a person said, I want to do it in a message or something like that, does it lose any power? I guess that's what I want to know.
I think in person is always more powerful. But it works even if you don't speak to the person, even if you never even send a message to the person, because it's not about the other person.
Right.
It's about you. It's about you and your feelings and how you react and respond. So, a lot of people do these various rituals where they forgive or whatever it is that they're dealing with, and then they write it down and then they burn it and they send it to universe. That also works.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't matter which technique or methodology you use. It's just a matter of letting go. And, the word forgiveness, it's a bit of a double-edged sword because a lot of people see it as condoning the activities of the other person, but it's not condoning it. And if people can just understand that forgiveness is about you and it's about letting go, it may help the other person, which is great, but it's not condoning, and it's not saying that man shouldn't have spent 25 years in prison. It's not saying they shouldn't get whatever punishment they deserve. It's just saying, I'm not going to hold it. I'm not going to be bitter and twisted. I'm going to move on with my life.
Yeah, that's amazing. I also wondered, did either of these people offer you an apology as part of when you offer them your forgiveness?
I have to think about that now. Nobody's asked me that question. I don't think so. I think the rapist actually said to me, I think he just said, all I want is for you to forgive me. I don't think he said, I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't think they said, and that's not the point either. I didn't need an apology. What was done was done. You can't undo. I always say it's so important that whatever happens to you, you've got to take the situation and you've got to separate it from the emotions. Okay, so that was done. You can't change the past.
Right.
They also say forgive and forget. You can't forget the
Yeah.
past. So it's not forgetting it. It's just saying that and how I feel about it are two completely different things. And if you can do that, you're already halfway to healing.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So I love that you said that, forgiveness doesn't mean that you condone the activity. I often say that, forgiveness doesn't mean I've accepted it or that I think it's okay. I don't think that what you did was right. I think it was wrong. But yeah, I think a lot of us, and I'm going to throw myself in this bag, get caught up in the whole I'd like an apology, whereas I realize, apologies are not common, especially when people do something really bad for whatever reason. I just whatever, feels hard. But to me, it's like I always say to myself, if I could just get an apology, then I would be, but I'm like, yeah, actually, I'm never going to get it. So really, it comes down to, forgiving that person. And I'm not going to say move on, but I love that break the bond comment you made. It's just they're doing themselves now, and they don't even need to cross your mind anymore. And I'm guessing that you didn't feel any fear from this man either, knowing he was going to get out. They were going to let you know so that you could be prepared or whatever is how that usually works. But you didn't even have any of that for him anymore, is what I'm gathering from your comments.
Yeah, and absolutely. He's just not on my radar anymore. So.
Yeah, and hopefully, I mean, I don't know. I don't know about whether people can be, rehabilitated, especially in the prison system, well, especially here in the US. I'm not sure about how your prison system works, but here I don't know. But anyway, I hope the man, if he did get out, has gone on to do better things. So tell us about your book. So you wrote a book, and I think your TED talk is on the same, your TEDx talk is on the same topic, but and your podcast. So tell us about, kind of what's in your book. If I'm reading your book or I'm listening to your TED talk or your podcast, what am I going to learn? What am I going to, what thing might I be helped by that or, take away?
Well, it's my book is part memoir, part self-help guide. So it started off as a journal. I was so angry. This happened way before the Me Too movement, and the word rape was never mentioned in polite circles. And so it just wasn't spoken about, and it didn't happen to nice people like me. And so I wanted my story to get out. I really wanted it to get out. So I started writing a journal with every intention of publishing it. But over the years, I couldn't find an ending, and it just became a diary, and it was pretty boring. And so it just lay around. And after I forgave, I thought, okay, there, I've got my conclusion for the book. But then I was living in the Middle East. I became a world traveler. I was living the high life, and the book just wasn't important anymore. And only when I came back to South Africa, which was another challenge, I was forced to come back. They didn't want to renew my work visa because of my age. You get to a certain age, they don't want you anymore. So I had to come back to South Africa, and I thought, okay, now it's time to put the book to bed. But now I changed it from part memoir to part self-help guide. So I've created a model where it's like a journey of healing, where it takes you from being a victim to a survivor to a thriver, and then finally to freedom. And it gives tips on how to do that as you go through the book. So for example, when you're a victim in the early stages after you face any kind of trauma, and it could also be the loss of a loved one or the loss of a job, it could be anything. You are in that victim phase. That's when you've got all those negative emotions of hatred, anger, sadness, whatever the emotion is. And when you're in that phase, it's very difficult to even consider forgiving. You can't forgive. You've got to deal with those emotions. You've got to manage how you feel about things. So when people say, I can't forgive, it's because they're still either in the victim or in the survivor phase. And, they say we survivors. I don't like that term, because I think survivor is still a struggle word. You're still struggling when you're a survivor. That's where you've got to build your resilience to get yourself back on your feet. And they say resilience is bouncing back. You don't bounce back. You crawl back, you fall back, you crawl back up again. But then you become a thriver. And that's where you have the grit, where you have the determination and the passion and the perseverance to move forward with a clear new objective. And it's at that phase that you get that growth mindset. What have I learned from that experience? And that is when you can truly forgive. So I always say, you go on this journey at your own pace. Don't rush it. You'll know when you're ready.
So one thing that I have discovered, not just with my own experiences, but from other people I've talked to, is when something bad happens like that, and I don't like to use the word victim either because it makes me feel powerless, is the term that comes to mind as I deserve to be angry. I deserve to, dislike this person, hate this person, be angry. And I know especially part of the grieving process, anger we're more in control for angry than if we just have grief and bereavement and all that kind of stuff. So, I'm kind of curious, how that must be part of the first part is obviously I can't forgive someone that I'm angry with, or can I still be angry with them, but forgive them? I would think holding on to that anger is going to still keep that bond between me and this person. I would like to just not even be in my head anymore.
Now, when you're holding that anger, you can't forgive, because the two are linked. You've got to break free of the anger. So you've got to deal with those emotions. And it's okay to have the anger and the hatred. It's okay to have it, because at that point in time, they've done something that's really upset you, and you're allowed to feel that. There's a movement, one of the positive mindset movements, that says just move on, don't hang on to it. And I'm saying you need to process it. You can't just say, okay, I'm happy. You need to understand, why am I angry? What has this taught me? What is the lesson that it's given me? And then say, okay, now that I understand what it did for me then, how do I want to feel? Where do I want to go? And then look for the more positive emotion to replace the negative one.
Yeah.
But it needs process.
I'm also thinking, like the rapist, where he said, the thing he wanted most was to have your forgiveness. In my head, as soon as you said that, I thought to myself, well, I wouldn't want to give him what he wanted. But I can forgive you, but I don't want to give you what you want. Where, it's almost like, so is that is that part of this where you have to, again, that's got to be part of the anger. I got to get rid of that, because if I don't want you to feel better about being forgiven, then clearly I still haven't worked through the process of wanting to get through that forgiveness, would be my thought process on that.
No, it literally is just saying, whatever happens to you now, it's not my concern anymore. And so how can I be angry with you? You're not in my life. You're nothing. You just go away.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so you need to the first thing is to deal with those emotions before anything else.
Yeah. Now, if someone's listening to us and they're in that space where they've been betrayed or they've been hurt in just a horrible way, what are the baby steps? Where do we start? Where do we get to where we, I'm obviously, I'm not going to go from this moment in time to 10 minutes from now to being where you are, right? It's like, what are the baby steps to get there? And how do I recognize that I'm on the right path? Right. And then, I guess to me, it's like a diet, right? It's not going to happen real quick to lose this weight, right? So how do I recognize I'm going the right direction? And you mentioned earlier about a couple steps backward, a couple steps forward. So, what would you say to someone who's brand new and saying, no, I don't know how I'm ever going to be able to do this?
Well, there's so many different methodologies and therapies and things that you can use, and each person is going to find what is right for them. What works for me may not work for you, but it's important. So, mindfulness, just starting to practice mindfulness, to examine the emotion, understand how the emotion, where does it feel in your body? What color is it? What does it taste like? What does it smell like? And just see, well, what is that doing to me? That's making me feel blah. And then say, well, how would I like to feel? Maybe it's black in my heart. Well, I want my heart to be yellow. I want my heart, we're so good these days at doing vision boards about what we want in our careers and our life, but we don't do it with our emotions. Create a vision board of the emotions that you want. And then look at that every day and say, that's how I want to feel. And start focusing on how you want to feel after you've dealt with how you do feel.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's good. I like the vision board. I'm a very visual person. So for me, it's like, oh, I like that. That's like putting little sticky notes on my fridge for, little positive thoughts during the day and so on. So that's a great one to do. But yeah, I love that.
And affirmations and talking about it. Now, you don't want to just go out and talk. I went very public. I became an activist. I was out there changing the world. Not everybody can do that, and not everybody should do that. But talk to somebody close, to a therapist. Talk to your dog or your cat, or even to yourself in the mirror. Because by speaking it out, you're sharing it with the universe, you're expressing it, you're starting to manage it and deal with it. And the universe takes some of that pain away from you. So talking is incredibly therapeutic. But don't go public unless you've got the resources and the support before you go public. I went very public straight away. I marched through the streets, and it was just, I was crazy. And I landed up in hospital 2 years later. My back just collapsed, and I had 2 failed back operations. And it was pointed out to me that there was nothing wrong with my back. It was all in my head. So it was psychosomatic, because what I was doing, I wasn't dealing with the emotions. I was putting it behind me and putting it behind me and putting it behind me until my back said, wait a minute, I can't hold you up anymore. And I collapsed. And the surgeon had told me that I would never hike or scuba dive again, which were my 2 passions, because I could never carry anything on my back. Well, after then dealing with the emotions, I had 8 chiropractic treatments, and I did a 5-day hiking trail with a 29-kilogram backpack on my back.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah.
And that is the power of the mind and dealing with those emotions. It took me 2 years. I carried that pain for 2 years, and it was over just like that once I realized that it was all in my head.
It really speaks to the power of the mind. I mean, when you manifest pain and it becomes pain in your back because you put it behind you, and when people say it's in your head, it's kind of an offensive comment. When I hear it, it's like, it's not in my head, it's real, my back hurts, right? But still, that's just such a powerful way to think about it. Your mind is so powerful that it can, hang on to things like that, and it also can get rid of them. It can set them free and move on and not have that space in my space anymore. So I love that. Absolutely love hearing that. So
And then the one tip that I want to give everybody, forgiveness is like a muscle, and we can all learn to forgive. Today, everybody keeps a gratitude journal. Every day, 3 things that we're grateful for. I say, add to your gratitude journal 3 things to forgive myself for and 3 things to forgive others for. Little things, things that you don't think need forgiveness. I forgive myself for kicking the dog for eating my slipper. I forgive myself for burning the toast. I forgive myself for forgetting to phone my friend on her birthday. Little things. And then 3 little things that you can forgive somebody else for. I forgive the dog for eating my slipper. I forgive my friend for forgetting to phone me on my birthday. Or I forgive the husband for not bringing the milk home when I asked him to. Little silly little things until it becomes part of who you are. As I said, I call myself your friend for forgiveness, because forgiveness now is instantaneous for me. I can forgive immediately. I cannot hold a grudge. I cannot hold resentment. It is just so easy to forgive because it's who I am now. And it's just practice, like the gratitude journal. Just practice it every day. And we can find things. I forgive myself for pushing the snooze on the alarm this morning or whatever, There's many things we can forgive ourselves and others for.
Yeah.
You can even go big and you can forgive the politicians for the mess they're making of the world.
That's a big one here. I'm not sure if we can do that here in the US, but that's a totally different type of podcast. That's for sure. So, well, thank you so much. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we finish today?
No, that's it really. Just know that it's your own journey. You go at it at your own pace. There are people to help you. There's coaches and therapists. You will find the right one that works for you, and know that you are not alone. There is somebody out there who has a similar story or who's been through something, who will be able to support you on your journey.
Yes, and we are going to post, of course, the links to your book and your podcast and your TEDx talk too, so people can see and read what you have done and reach out should they wish to reach out to you. So again, thank you so much. You are actually, I've made so many notes of things that I'm going to review later for myself. So I really appreciate your time, and thank you so much for being my guest.
Thank you so much, Christine, and go well.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Good Grief. To hear more about my personal story, please pick up a copy of my book, The Day I Became the Spider Killer, a memoir of trauma, tragedy, and survival, available in paperback, Kindle, and Audible via Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and other online book retailers.